My opponent and I disagree on a host of issues. My request is that come November 4th, you're asking yourselves, what does real amount of values mean to you?
I have tried to see to it that my service was characterized by three traits: effectiveness, hard work, and availability.
Now, if you're an executive of a poorly performing company, you certainly shouldn't be getting your golden parachute. I'm not saying government shouldn't be intervening at all. One of the problems is that government actually encouraged those banks to give out to lower middle income people, and actually wealthy people as well, mortgages that they can't afford. And then they allowed them to take equity out, and people overextended themselves. I blame three people in this process, or three groups in this process. One, I blame Washington for encouraging the banks to do that. Two, the banks, in order to be responsible executives, they should have known better than extending credit to people that wouldn't have been able to afford to foot the bill. And three, those that overextended themselves, the individuals that are foreclosing on their homes, that are defaulting on their credit card arrangements. But I don't believe Wall Street should be bailed out by Main Street. I believe that Wall Street should be bailed out by Wall Street, and that's why I oppose the bailout.
I would say that it would be great if private capital could come into the market. But private capital is not going to come into the market so long as confidence is at low a level as it is. No one is going to invest money that they don't think they have a reasonable chance of getting back. Job one is to restore confidence in the markets and to restore liquidity and some freedom of movement to the credit markets. That's precisely what the recovery package is designed to do. It has been in place now for 13 days. And I think it is premature to evaluate whether or not it is going to work. I think
Our nation's immigration policy is flawed. Everyone can agree on that. We have local government that's forced to deal with the problem because Congress isn't doing their job. Now, every time a member of Congress, Republican, Democrat, is running, whether it be 2008, 06, 04, and the issue of legal immigration comes up, they talk about what needs to be done. But we have to ask ourselves, are we going to give another chance to those that are in Washington right now? Maybe we really wouldn't be much worse off if we just fired all of them. Specifically, right here in our own district, we have employers that are not paying taxes and workers' compensation on their employees. They need to be penalized. We need to secure our borders. When you have a leak, the first thing you don't do is take out a mop, you turn off the faucet.
I think what we'd like to hear is what specifically you would do to address this issue.
One thing I proposed last week was an 18.5% tax on wiring money out of the country. And I proposed that the money that is wired out of the country goes back to the local economy where the money is wired out of. So there's a lot of untaxed income here in the east end of Long Island. If my idea was enacted into law, you'd have a lot of revenue that's not being taxed stay in our local economy to contribute towards our education or contribute towards our hospitals. But I would support penalizing employers that aren't paying taxes and workers' compensation. I would support giving those that want to continuing to give those that pick up a weapon their citizenship papers the day that they sign up. I oppose amnesty. I oppose hiring halls for illegal aliens as well. Two main areas of contrast between my opponent and I.
this is the most emotional issue to deal with, at least in this district, in my opinion. And I think there's one thing that we all ought to be able to agree on, and that is that the status quo is unacceptable. Now, in my view, there is a plan to address it. It's called Comprehensive Immigration Reform, and it is in fact the plan crafted by Senator McCain and Senator Kennedy, the bill that was in the Senate and sadly defeated in the Senate in 2007. I support it, and I'm a sponsor of the House version, which is also a bipartisan bill. It does four things. It significantly hardens the border to make it much more difficult for people to enter the country illegally. That is step one in any immigration policy. Secondly, it cracks down on what we call internal enforcement, cracking down on employers who hire illegal workers. Thirdly, it addresses the visa situation and comprises or puts together appropriate visa programs that have the appropriate number of slots to recognize the needs that our economy has in certain areas. And lastly, and this is the most controversial piece of it, it requires or it allows for a path to earned legalization.
Do you believe that every American is entitled to health insurance, or only those who can afford it?
We are the richest, most technologically advanced most powerful nation in the world. We have 47 million people who are uninsured, and that's an obscenity. We must move to universal coverage.
As far as providing healthcare to every American, I would not say that they're entitled to it. I would say this is the best country in the world, though. And we need to do whatever we can to make sure we have affordable healthcare for every American. That is righteous. It's not an entitlement, but it's righteous.
Given the deteriorating situation in Afghanistan and Pakistan, as reported by a recent national intelligence estimate, what steps should be taken to assure that radical jihadists don't regain a strong foothold in those countries?
There's an area called Waziristan. It's on the Pakistan-Afghanistan border. It's on the Pakistan side of the border. We can add 300,000 more troops to Afghanistan. Until we do anything with Waziristan, we're never going to be able to take out Al-Qaeda and the Taliban the way we need to. That is where the Central Command and Control Network is. It's on the Pakistan side of the border. Now, diplomacy can never be taken off the table as an option. However, we need to show a willingness to utilize the force necessary, because those people that are there in Pakistan are those that lead Al-Qaeda and the Taliban. These are the people that were responsible for attacks prior to 9/11, attacks on 9/11, attacks since, attacks on our troops in Iraq, attacks on our troops in Afghanistan, and they're not just going to go away.
I spoke briefly to Congressman Israel today. He just returned from a weekend trip to Afghanistan, and he said to me that the situation is rapidly spinning out of control in Afghanistan, and that we desperately need to provide 25,000 additional troops to Afghanistan. Guess what? We don't have them. We don't have them because they're in a country that they should have never been sent to in the first place. So job one is to turn Iraq over to the Iraqi government and the 470,000 member strong Iraqi army and police force, and allow us to do what we need to do, which is to fight the enemy that attacked us, Al-Qaeda, in Afghanistan.
I mean, whether or not we should have been in Iraq in the first place, the fact is we're there now. We have troops in harm's way. They deserve our support. And the last two times that Congress passed and signed into law the necessary ammunition, supplies, and equipment for our troops overseas, my opponent voted no. Now, fortunately, there aren't a majority of Tim Bishops in Congress, so of course they passed it and the troops overseas got their ammunition. But if you raise your hand and you say you want to serve, you're handed a weapon, you're given a uniform, and you're sent overseas, you better not find out once you get over there that your congressman back home is voting against the ammunition in your weapon. Whether or not we should have been there in the first place, the fact is we're there now. We have troops in harm's way. They deserve our support.
If we assess whether the surge worked or not by simply assessing whether or not violence has gone down in Iraq, by that measure, the surge has worked. I would suggest to you that that's the wrong metric. We should assess whether or not the surge has worked by whether or not we are now safer as a nation, whether our national security has improved. And I would suggest to you that by any reasonable measure, the war in Iraq, particularly given the fact that we have given added emphasis to that war, has made us less safe, not more safe.
What is your plan to reduce U.S. reliance on foreign oil?
We must dramatically increase our investment, both public and private, in alternative sources of fuel. Now, whether that be solar or wind or tidal or biomass or clean coal, once we can identify the technology, whatever it is, we have to dramatically increase our research and development and the marketing of what comes out of that research and development, and the Congress is trying to do that.
We need to reduce our reliance on foreign oil because we're relying on countries that hate America. And I don't want my kids and grandkids fighting overseas 20 years from now and 40 years from now because we're still relying on foreign oil. So I believe that we need to both utilize our own resources, whether it be our own oil resources. At the same time, we have to rapidly increase our research and development into alternative energy resources so that someday we can reduce our reliance on oil altogether. Now, in doing so, here on the east end of Long Island, we have our own natural resources. I believe we could be the future of green energy. Now we could create more jobs right here because we have some very bright minds and our own natural resources.